Thanks for joining us from the Ohio AgNet Voice You Know with the News You Trust studio, sponsored by BASF, where you can count on the trusted performance of Allevo seed treatment to protect your soybean crop. The Trump administration granted 2 full small refinery exemptions, 50% exemption on 12 petitions, and denied 2 other petitions for compliance years 2021 to 2024, the Environmental Protection Agency said in a renewable fuel standard announcement on Friday. Now, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency announcing that decision on 16 small refinery exemption petitions to the renewable fuel standard. The announcement comes as the agency also considers public comments made on a proposal to reallocate biofuel gallons lost on 140 partial and full exemptions granted by the administration recently. With most of the old petitions now cleared, EPA is committed to working with the Department of Energy to address new petitions as quickly as possible and within the 90-day statutory review period, the EPA said in its release. Furthermore, on September 16, 2025, the agency announced a supplemental notice of proposed rulemaking that takes into consideration the expected impacts of the August 22, 2025 SRE decisions. EPA is reviewing comments on the supplemental proposed rule as the agency continues to work on final regulations for the Set 2 rule, as stated in the supplemental proposal. EPA intends to update the agency's projections of exempted gasoline and diesel volumes in the final rule based on any additional SREs issued after the proposal, including the petition decisions in this action. Today's weather brought to you by Seed Consultants. Simply better performance online at seedconsultants.com. Here's the forecast.
Strong north winds continue across the state of Ohio today. I'm Chief Meteorologist Ryan Martin. Let's take a look at that forecast update. These north winds are going to continue to kick up plenty of clouds coming off the Great Lakes, and I won't rule out lake effect precipitation in north central and northeastern parts of Ohio. However, we don't have a lot of lake to work with here. That's why I don't think the lake effect is as big of a problem for us today. It may end up being a little bit more tomorrow as winds turn westerly, but as the winds turn westerly, going all the way down the length of Lake Erie, maybe trying to deposit some cloud cover and some moisture in northeast Ohio, the temperatures are also climbing, so I don't think we have as much threat there. So honestly, we're escaping without much major problem today, but again, some clouds and some flurries around before all is said and done. We warm it nicely the second half of the week as those winds eventually go southwest for Wednesday forward, and that's going to push our temperatures back to, well, warmer levels. Maybe not as warm as where we were before this latest batch of moisture hit this past week, but still quite comfortable, and we're going to dry down quite quickly. I see no precipitation in the forecast the second half of this week. We may see a few hit-and-miss spits and sprinkles over southwestern parts of Ohio between midnight Friday night and daybreak Saturday morning, but they're gone very quickly. The rest of Saturday dry. Next frontal boundary ready to get moved through here on Sunday. Sunday the 16th, rain and potentially a few thunderstorms can hit all of the state of Ohio. I'm Ryan Martin.
And thanks, Ryan. In a reaction to the EPA announcement we just talked about, Kurt Kovarik, Clean Fuels Vice President of Federal Affairs, stated, Clean Fuels calls on EPA to keep its commitment to farmers and clean fuel producers and fully reallocate all exemptions granted so far or expected in the coming years. We appreciate EPA making decisions on exemptions in time to be accounted for in the pending rule, but we also ask the agency to finalize the overdue 2026 and 27 RFS rule by December 31st. And we emphasize that EPA must include both a full SRE reallocation volume for 23 through 25 exemptions, as well as a prospective estimate of exempted volumes for 2026 and 27. Joining me is Tad Nicholson, Executive Director of Ohio Corn and Wheat. Tad, thanks for joining us. One of the topics we continue to work on is E15. What's the negotiation at this point?
Well, right now we're looking at any vehicle that is moving, and that includes what's going to fix the government shutdown, and that's a continuing resolution. And so the whole idea of a clean continuing resolution, we're not for it. We want a continuing resolution that not only funds the federal government, but also fixes the outdated regulation that keeps us from selling E15 year-round. That's a permanent fix that corn farmers need right now.
And for corn farmers, it's a way to use up some of this supply that's not going to other places. We're able to produce more, and in some cases, that's a real challenge. But we've got ethanol, we've got DDGs, we've got corn, and the world loves it all. So why can't our congressmen and senators understand the value of E15, producing our own, environmentally friendly? I'm probably stealing your speech.
Well, you should just go to D.C. with me, Dale, and you could tell that same thing to the folks there. It doesn't cost anybody a dime. It opens up permanent markets for corn farmers. Everything is positive. And we're also partnering with the petroleum industry. So we don't have any of our usual gripes and those type of things. We're in agreement. We just need to get this thing done, Dale. It's time to do it right now.
So when farmers finish harvest, will there be a push to help Washington better understand why this is important to them?
Well, you bet. We always have to let them know how important markets are. We don't need just government payments. We don't need just a check, keep us going another year. We need permanent fixes, and E15 represents a permanent fix.
And thank you, Tad Nicholson, Executive Director of Ohio Corn and Wheat. After a push by agricultural groups, phosphate and potash were added to the federal government's list of critical minerals that was finalized by the U.S. Geological Survey that should help spur more investment in domestic supply chains for both minerals. The critical minerals list began because the country is heavily reliant on imports of certain minerals, some of which are at risk of serious, sustained, and long-term supply chain disruptions. The inclusion of phosphate and potash on the list signals a heightened government policy around the production and supply chains for both fertilizers. That can include helping companies secure mining permits or other federal support to increase domestic production. The list also plays a role in trade policy, such as whether imports should face a duty or exports should be restricted. By being designated as a critical mineral, producers can access potash and phosphate reserves more quickly thanks to streamlined permitting and reduced time and resource requirements for bringing new domestic supply online, said Chris Glenn, spokesperson for the Fertilizer Institute. This translates into more reliable and timely fertilizer supply for farmers. Also, as designation of a critical mineral helps reduce U.S. reliance on countries such as China and Russia, which are the dominant global exporters of phosphate and potash, the Fertilizer Institute stated. Currently, China and Russia control 53% of global phosphate production, with Morocco contributing another 13%. That kind of concentration leaves the global market vulnerable to deliberate supply manipulation or unexpected disruptions. Back with more after this.
Get the equipment and trucks you need at the Ritchie Brothers' next Great Lakes Regional event on November 12th and 13th. This absolute unreserved auction will feature online bidding, and items are located in Columbus, Chicago, and Detroit. Choose from close to 3,000 items, including a wide selection of construction equipment, semi-trucks, and more. Don't miss Ritchie Brothers' Great Lakes Regional event on November 12th and 13th. For more details, visit rbauction.com. Again, that's rbauction.com.
Here's farmer and landowner John Prue.
We purchased the land about 3 years ago, and there was an old farmstead on there with trees. We were going to clear the land so we could farm through it. We thought we knew where the pipe was, so we didn't call to get it located. The work on our property led to the damage of a light crude pipeline. Fortunately, no one was hurt, but it could have been much worse.
Never assume the location or depth of underground lines. Always call 811 or visit clickbeforeyoudig.com before you start work. A message from the Pipeline Operators for Ag Safety campaign.
Today's market analysis is brought to you by the Louis Dreyfus Company. Excited to be building the newest state-of-the-art soybean crush facility in Upper Sandusky, Ohio. For marketing information on your beans to LDC, call 574-566-2113. Here's Ryan Martin.
Grain markets finished mixed on Friday. The corn market was down about a penny or so. Bean markets up 7 to 10 cents. Bean oil was a little bit stronger. Bean meal was a little stronger. The wheat markets were down 5 to 7 cents overall. What were the talking points on Friday? Well, it sounded like there was a little bit of a trade deal exhaustion beginning on Friday. Did the U.S. and China sign a deal? If so, what is the deal? Will China adhere to it? What's going on at the Supreme Court? If the Supreme Court rules against the Trump tariffs, does China even need to sign a trade deal? All of these things were kind of working through the marketplace toward the end of last week. The Chinese understanding of the U.S.-China trade framework deal is either being misunderstood or understood to China's advantage. Already there are frays in the rare earth and mineral part of the deal, with China not completely easing export rules, which fall short of the Trump administration's hope. China will allow shipments of rare earth metals to the U.S. for non-military purposes. The licensing of China's rare earth minerals will take months, the whole process timely and costly. All this being said, the market just doesn't know where to go. China was asking for offers on Brazilian soybeans for January delivery last Friday morning. Amid the cheap Brazilian offers, the economic window for China to secure and export U.S. soybeans is down for the last 2 weeks of December. China can make a cash purchase of U.S. soybeans, but such a purchase is likely for next summer, when the U.S. and Brazil FOB and CIF offers are going to be closer to being similar. Remember, we saw a big drop-off in basis last week in Brazil, which made the Brazil soybean a heck of a lot cheaper. Brazil corn, kind of the same way. EPA decided on Friday, or at least told us about decisions on 16 small refinery waivers. The EPA granted 2 100% exemptions, 12 50% partial exemptions, and denied 2 petitions. The news was seen as initially bearish to soy oil futures, and then we saw them ease back off of that, the soy oil futures, that is. Still remains to be seen what happens here. There's hope that maybe some of those will get reallocated. I don't think we find out this week, but maybe. I'm Ryan Martin.
And thanks, Ryan. I'll look at the overnight figures after this.
That's what it's like to have hearing loss. Agricultural workers experience one of the highest rates of hearing loss and may have substantial hearing loss by age 30. Wear your hearing protection so you don't miss out on life's sweet sounds.
Daddy, daddy, dad.
This message brought to you by the Ohio AgNet, Ohio State Extension Ag Safety and Health Team, and this station.
Think biodiesel is just another fuel? Think again. Biodiesel is Ohio innovation on the move. Clean, green, and built to keep diesel engines running strong. It's an engine booster, a soybean supporter, and an environmental champion all in one. Every gallon reduces emissions, strengthens Ohio farms, and powers your ride. Drive with purpose. Choose biodiesel. Learn how at soyohio.org. Today's market is brought to you by Seed Consultants. Simply better performance online at seedconsultants.com. Overnight at the open, December corn up a half at 427 3/4. March up a half at 442 1/2, and May $4.51, up a half a cent. November beans a little better than that, up 4 3/4 at $11.06 1/2. January's up 4 at $11.21, and March up 3 1/4 at $11.29. The July wheat is up 2 1/2 at $5.64, while September is unchanged at $5.73 3/4. In livestock, December cattle on Friday closed up $2.57 at $221.35. February up $3 at $219.75. April up $3.02 at $219.72. December lean hogs up 42 at $79.40. That was the only plus in hogs. February down 47 at $79.35. And April down 50 cents at $83.40. Feeder cattle with another strong day. January up $3.97, bringing it to $319.57. March up $2.97 at $313.97. And April $311.90, up $2.67. Well, yesterday's weather ended up the end of the nice stuff. We're back to what winter normally should look like. It was about 5 o'clock yesterday evening, and we had just started to see a little sprinkling. And by the time I walked the dogs at 7 o'clock, the ground, at least in the grass portion, was already covered. So it's beginning to look a lot more like winter in Ohio. Of course, all of that can continue to change. Thanks for joining us. Have a great day, everyone. I'm Dale Minyo. This is the Ohio AgNet.